부모님 성회 평화의 원 양성을 위한 신통일 한국 평화 포럼의 카운트다운을 시작합니다.
A countdown for the Heavenly Parents Holy Community
인류 역사상 최초로
Forum for Peace.
갈등을 해소하는 새로운 평화 사상과 체제.
A new philosophy of peace,
대천, 애인,
love
애국,
of heaven, of country, and of all people.
공영, 공익,
Interdependence, mutual
그
prosperity,
빛이 아닌 참가정,
universal
통일로
values,
열리는
true family
아시아
values,
태평양 문명권 시대.
start of the
이제
Asia-Pacific
세계
civilization,
중심 대한민국은 경제 강국,
the Korean Peninsula's role in the world,
새롭게 태어납니다. 평화 세계의 모델,
and the model for peace in the world,
신통일 한국 안착을 위하여.
for the sake of the realization of a heavenly unified Korea. Good morning. Welcome to the second Peace Forum for a Heavenly Unified Korea. I am Mr. Om, and I will be your MC for today. I'm very pleased.
So we'll be tensions between the two Koreas and struggle between neighboring countries and also between the rich and the poor. We're seeing more and more conflicts as time passes. But what's more disheartening is that we cannot find hope. And in the past, when we looked at 30-something% of our population actually were facing depression, and we were actually rated first among all countries in the world. And so it is with this that we're holding now this peace forum, to be able to find that hope, to be able to give that hope to people, and the Heavenly Unified Korea is a vision of hope that will guide Korea toward peace and unification. And so a Heavenly Unified Korea in this current state will definitely help Korea find new hope. So I am truly happy to be here with you all, peace-loving people, and I hope that you can all find hope in a Heavenly Unified Korea through this time. And the Peace Forum on the Heavenly Unified Korea will guide Korea in critical state to one of hope. So from now, let us all begin the second Peace Forum on the Heavenly Unified Korea with a warm round of applause.
강의에 앞서 This was a very important presentation for the sake of the unification of North and South Korea. Let's offer him one more round of welcome applause and thank you for his presentation. At this time, now, coming to the stage, one who has been on the front line of working for Heavenly Unified Korea. This is Dr. Jin Sung-bae, who authored the Heavenly Unified Korea theory. Let us welcome him with a warm applause. Dr. Jin Sung-bae, Chairman of Hyojung World Peace Foundation, Chairman of Hyojung Academic Conference, and former Vice President of Sunmun University. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. As the chairman of Hyojung Academic Foundation, I'm very honored to come before you and stand on this auspicious forum. At this time, and as the second of the series of lectures on this topic of Heavenly Unified Korea, we're speaking about the theoretical foundation of Heavenly Unified Korea from the standpoint of the dual essentialities. So those of you who are participating now in the wake of the last conference that we had, and we are very grateful to the World Headquarters for allowing us this forum, this platform, to speak on such an important topic. This is very significant at this time. The content we have been continuously working on and upgrading. So we are giving you the latest, and we're grateful because the leader of the Hundok Way at the palace has authorized us to give this content to you all. I see many important leaders out there in the audience. So today, to share this content with you and to give this lecture is really a great privilege and honor. So in terms of Hundok, when we read True Father's words, these are very relevant and they're based upon the unification thought and the principle. So we've prepared a very careful, very detailed PPT, PowerPoint slide presentation, which I want to share with you. So as we give this content, consider this with the same heart and attitude that you would do a Hundok reading. So this is shining with the light of heaven's grace. So at the time of giving this, it may be complex contents and maybe new for you. I wish you to have the heavenly grace and fortune to be able to receive these things, that these may reside deeply with you. This very important lecture, in fact, he's an important lecturer, I want to say. So you may hear similar contents, but you probably won't be hearing it from the source. So today is very special. That's why let us proceed. At this time, our topic is centering upon true parentism, the importance of the dual essentialities, the dual characteristics of Seongsang and Hyeongsang, and Yang and At this auspicious forum, in this conference today,
상당한 방대한 책입니다. 한 장 자체가 저희가 일주일 꼬박 수련하고 제가 하루에 10시간씩 일주일 동안
We held a 10-hour lecture, and in fact we even have a 30-hour lecture, which not that many people participated in, about 150. So to get these contents, I want to let you know that these contents are still only a limited portion of the whole contents. So I'm very sorry that we have such a limited time, less than 1 hour, to present this important contents to you. But we want to remind you, in terms of the dual essentialities, centering upon the principle, we can understand the difference between the freedom, free democracy, and the socialism, or materialist socialism. Based upon the dual essentialities, we can analyze, centering upon this principle of dual essentialities in the divine principle, every issue can be addressed and we can come up with resolution and proposals. That's why I am offering this lecture today centered upon these dual essentialities. So we want to offer some kind of an ideal model that religious people and also scientific people can embrace. So to find and to craft a policy based upon the dual essentialities for addressing the unification of North and South Korea. By doing everything within our power, we want to come up with the highest level of the presentation, Heavenly Unified Korea Theory. It's basically very simple. Every existence contains dual essentialities of yang and male and female, and also the internal and external, or seongsang and hyeongsang. The content, the core is heart, or 심정. And outward from that we have the seongsang, which is internal nature, and hyeongsang, which is the nature of form or body, physical, material. Every material being has these dual essentialities. First of all, in our lecture, what is the essence of peace? Whether it can be done by absorption or by federal power, reunification through absorption or the federal method. We're going to address this and look at this question. This is chapter 5 in our lecture. From where can we derive a policy to resolve this question?
이것은 사실 5장인데 오늘 강의 편의상 제일 처음에
First of all, in giving this lecture, addressing the peace issue, we have to deal with real situations, real problems, the core problem or essential problem of peace. South Korea is based upon the concept of peace, which is we can call seongsang. Between the dual essentialities, they more emphasize the seongsang, or spiritual side. So why would there be a conflict? In fact, we observe conflict even in the South. Approaching North and South Korean unification, a major advocate of South Korea, which is America, we saw that from North Korea, the event happened where the Kaesong Industrial Complex Unification Liaison Center was exploded. After such a long 72 years effort for North Korean and South Korean talks, and everything was brought to naught, so it would seem.
그다음에 싱가포르 하노이의 1, 2차
Then there was the Singapore talks. They failed. The Hanoi talks with President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un also failed. So the American Secretary of State Pompeo declared that denuclearization with North Korea has failed without even taking the first step. So why did these inter-Korean talks end in vain? The reason is quite simple. It's because the concept of denuclearization is different. So we need this concept of the heavenly unified Korea to address this issue which the state nations could not resolve, could not succeed in approaching. So having ended in failure, the North Korea was backed into a corner, and in the end they refused to give up the nuclear arms. So the negotiators had to go away with empty hands. The Americans insist that they remove all of their nukes from Korea, from North Korea, whereas the North Koreans demand that the U.S. Forces leave from South Korea, declare an end to the war, and to remove all the nukes from Korea. So there's two different concepts of denuclearization. So because the two could not agree on their basic concept, this is actually, of course, an external issue, but there are more internal reasons. So both sides are emphasizing and refuse to back down from their standpoint. The Korean government, based upon a concept of peace, which in fact is they're dealing with a disguised peace, because the North Korean side basic standpoint is that because they cannot agree on this standpoint, that's why they cannot resolve this issue of peace. Ends up futile. So the concept of peace based upon 심장, it is an essential peace essentialism based upon heart. Then there's the materialist viewpoint, which is the viewpoint centered upon the leader, the Kim Jong-un, and the spiritualist viewpoint, or the idealistic viewpoint, is a kind of relativistic peace, a peace looking at the substantial realities. So Kim Il-sung had proclaimed that do not forget for a moment that we cannot have peace until we liberate South Korea and reunify the country. So their philosophies are based upon, on the one side, a strict materialism, and the other side is a relativistic idealism. For the 72, since 1972, North and Korea has been maintaining strictly that internally they will not back down from their intention to basically invade and liberate the South according to their own ideology. So this statement, which was made on July 4th declaration in 1972, basically stands states their standpoint very firmly, and that has not changed.
바꾸기 전에는 평화라는 것이 있을 수 없다는 것이죠.
In other words, from the side of North Korea, there cannot be peace until or unless they liberate the South and they establish a North Korean type of government throughout the whole entire peninsula. So next we have President Kim Jong-il and then President Kim Jong-un. Have they changed as the future president of Korea? All of them are holding to the same party line very firmly. So we would have to characterize this as a false or disguised peace strategy. They're not intending to do what they are speaking of in the talks or openly. So based upon a disguised peace, it's quite frightful, quite threatening. So the chairman of North Korea has basically stated his strategy publicly and openly. So if you base peace upon hatred, upon a philosophy of materialism or disguised peace, it does not bring a harmony and peace, but it amplifies conflict and loathing. That's why the policies and the philosophies behind both sides are radically different. So the solution is we need 심정, which is heart, a heart which is both horizontal and vertical, which connects to the origin. For 50 years or more, every time we make an advance, we fall back. Failure after failure, in spite of all the hope. We have to look at the issue of thought, of ideology, of philosophy. And everything so far has ended up in a denial. That's why we cannot approach it ultimately without coming to the issue of heart as the core, the emotional feeling, artistic, based on a solid root. A peace based on the free liberal democracy. This is the idea of the South. So what kind of a strategy are we building with that base? Again, we see this relative peace, the absence of war, and we can call that peace. Also in the United Nations, peace is viewed as a lack of war, but there are no peace essentialism in these expressions. How can we reach the core, peace essentialism? So a very relativistic peace concept. President Moon Jae-in speaking in the way that if we can please President Kim Jong-un, then everything's okay. So in that case, it all depends upon basically the mood of the North Korean leader. Everything depends upon his mood. So that's a relativistic peace approach, which we basically see in the democratic countries in viewing North Korea. In the case of North Korea, they're based upon the material values, a labor theory of value, and centered upon material view of
이
history.
문제가 해결되지 않고서는 평화의 본질에 대한 문제가 해결되지
So
않고서는
to solve this problem, we need to go to the peace essentialism, the core of the peace concept.
다음은 이제
Next,
갈등과 문화혁명 문제인데 이것도
looking at this issue of division,
되는 갈등, 남북 갈등만 있는 것만 아니고 이 남남 갈등이
we find that there is a conflict not only between North and South, but also in the South itself. This is curious. This is called the South-South conflict and the Cultural Revolution. Cultural Revolution is a concept that came from neo-Marxism.
좌파 우파가 서로 결집해서 세대결을 하면서 이 광화문 현장에서
So by approaching the issue from a social scientific viewpoint, we can view this conflict going on in South Korea between two different types of Marxism or socialism which are influential not only in South Korea but around the world now. It's a cultural revolution, backing off from the communism, which is supposed to have seen its demise at the end of the Soviet Union. Now, this ideological division is no longer the main issue, but now it's an issue of the cultural revolution that we're dealing with. So, can we see any kind of a miracle? Can we expect a miracle? Not at all. We have to deal with the ideological background that's at hand. This is quite dangerous because now the young people in the South are being extensively influenced in schools and colleges, universities, and in society and their cultural. And it's not only an issue of ideology, but now it's culture. So what kind of cultural revolution are we speaking of? People are learning in subtle ways from their media, from the society. So the failure, the conflict between the two different parties, the NL group, which is, now there are two different types of factions or groups. On the one hand, we have the ones who are more material-centered, Hyeongsang, we could say. Hyeongsang is material or external. And we see that people have suffered throughout history. On the side of the Seongsang, the spiritual or idealistic side, how do they view things? Which way is going to win out? The spiritual side, the material side, the capitalist and democratic side, or the socialist and material side? To Mother emphasized, we must educate people. Education is of the utmost importance. In other words, at all of our workshops, in the present reality that we're facing, we need to have more focused and intent workshop education about these core issues, including unification thought, also this North-South Korean unification. We have to resolve this problem of conflict. We need to go to the ideological root here and know what kind of ideological core is at the basis of these two sides. Now, let's look. There's the Marxist group, which is classical Marxism, based upon the bottom-up from the proletariat revolution, that they want to liberate the workers. And on the other hand, this is represented by the PD, or the on the other hand is the NL group, the National Liberation Group, which is centered upon Juche. They're North Korean oriented. And these two factions are appearing in the basically leftist or socialist-oriented young people and thinkers in Korean society. When we speak about a revolution, we're no longer speaking here about an ideological revolution, but a cultural revolution. And this is what's happening. This is what is very popular among people today. So these two concepts about quote-unquote revolution. So let's look at how much revolution they've actually accomplished if we speak about liberation. Which side will bring victory? In fact, what has happened, the figures of Habermas, of Alzheimer, and of Marcuse especially, are especially influential among young people, very popular. The old ideas of Marx have already gone by the wayside, and people are... Marx advocated a sexual revolution, and this has had very influential on young people today, and unfortunately it's causing devastation in our society. So first of all, we must resort to conscience. And at the bottom of that we find the 심장, heart. The Marx was reborn as the neo-Marxism. Marxism of the classical version, which is Revolution of the Proletariat, has re-emerged after the demise of communism in a new form, which is this neo-Marxism or cultural revolution, which is now very, very widespread, especially among universities and students and young people. So the Eros revolution, Eros is the actual sexual or instinct. People decide that they can follow their instincts, and they're liberating the Eros. This is the Eros revolution. Neo-Marxism has gotten a new weapon in this through this cultural revolution, especially with the sexual revolution. This is the hippie, the idea of hippies and free sex, the gay and lesbian. It takes many different forms in our society. So these are no joke, they're influential everywhere, and there's an agenda behind this. These are all the influences of the new cultural revolution. So they've already become legalized. In other words, this neo-Marxism is now being instituted in laws in America and Korea and around the world. So the conservative side, which backs traditional values, is being backed into the corner more and more. Family values are really collapsing big time. So Marcuse, who advocated this neo-Marxism and also the sexual revolution, it's extremely influential. How do we solve such a problem? Can Christianity, can the Christian churches, can the other religions deal with this? The basic problem started with a view of the human value. Let's look at the core of the Juche and the free democracy ideologies or cultures, social theories, centered upon the human value and theory of the human being. Again, Sengsang and Hyeongsang, internal and external. In free democracy, in the socialist idea, they advocate the liberation of the working class, the proletariat. And in the case of the free society, they advocate freedom, property, ownership, and human rights. Beginning with the French Revolution, emphasizing human rights and the liberation of people as human rights, individualism, equality, and property. This is the idea of liberal democracy today. It's gone towards the extreme in the direction of individualism. But the problem is, the human rights of others are violated when we exercise our unbridled human rights without following our conscience. So the French Revolution, which started with the idea of give me freedom or give me death, has now ended in extreme individualism, which harms others. So the ambition or greed must be bridled, must be limited by our conscience. If we just practice free ownership, property, and exercising over others, then the other people are going to suffer. And what are we going to do? Then where is freedom? Freedom has come to its limit. So we've reached the limit of our democratic concept in our free societies. So this problem of capitalism and individualism, materialism, has come to its own contradiction. So a lot of conflict is now showing up in democratic liberal societies. For students, it's very pleasant and interesting, fun, but when you get out in the society, you see the real problems face to face. We see conflicts going on in free society. There's conflicts over what is the meaning of freedom and what is the consequences of freedom. So I see many foreign students are here, and we have to be educated about equality, but at the same time, we realize that these things have consequences. So the people around the world are watching and they're seeing and sometimes suffering from. We look at the people going to MIT, Harvard, Seoul University, and people are crying out for social causes and human rights, and for equality. But honestly, where is the equality? It's like we didn't know the ABCs. That's why in the democratic world, we have to examine once more and reflect about our freedom and individualism. And now, let's look at the socialist side. They speak about the liberation of the working class, working people, people who are suffering in the past. They suffered under feudalism and under also capitalism. So they're calling for liberation for the. However, how do they do it? By killing the bourgeoisie and the ownership class and the rulers. So we have to solve these problems, all of them. So when we speak about cultural revolution, we need to be serious about the reality that we're dealing with around us. All of these problems we have to analyze very thoughtfully and carefully and fundamentally. What kind of liberation are we really looking for? Are we speaking about? Whether it's the human rights, or whether it's the Workers' Party, working people's liberation, and are we actually bringing liberation by these methods that we're advocating? So a revolution for the sake of equality or a revolution for the sake of freedom, both of them come out with different expressions or results. But in the end, have those revolutions brought what they promised? Neither one of them, both of them have come into a corner, a dead blind alley, so to speak.
가장 불평등하고
So the biggest
살육과 파괴로
complaint
있는 그러한 지옥으로 변모된 것을 알 수가 있습니다.
in the
이거 왜 그래요?
socialist revolution, there was incredible genocide
평등이라고 하는
for the sake of equality.
가치를 이해하지 못하고
Actually ended up killing millions of people.
벌어진 하나의 사건이라고
So who can liberate those people?
주체 사상도 마찬가지입니다.
In the same thing with Juche ideology, popular in North Korea and even in South Korea now,
주체 사상을 민중대중의 자주성을 실현하기 위한
they emphasize three things: autonomy and consciousness and creativity. That sounds good, of course.
갖는 인간인데 이때 인간은 일반적인 인간이 아니에요.
Now, but this doesn't apply to just regular people.
사상과
The problem is, it basically centers upon Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-un, and they are the ones who exercise this autonomy, this creativity, and this consciousness. So what about everybody? So this autonomy, this independence, this consciousness, dignity, and this creativity, they should belong to everybody, but they're being commandeered by a limited group of people, and especially by their leader. So it's a leader-centered autonomy. So speaking of humanism, from the standard of humanism, a ideology of revolution which advocates consciousness and autonomy, independence, creativity, a revolution for these purposes.
철학적이고 휴머니즘의 자성, 의성, 창조성이 아니에요.
It doesn't end up with that result at all.
그 때문에 이러한 혁명적 인간관을
So this idea of revolution, if we look at it from a humanistic standpoint, in communism they have not accomplished what they promised any more than the side of the free democratic societies. So it's led to this polarization, this conflict. So we need to resolve these things not by centering upon humanism as such. So centering upon the great leader and his method as being called the father and the leader, using a principle of social historical materialism, dialectical materialism, based upon the citizens. Now, let's look at the difference between the Christian God-centered belief and the communist or socialist belief, where we have the Mao, the God in a society of Juche Sasang, Juche ideology. They have their own kind of a God, which is actually the leader or father. So it's a kind of religion, interestingly speaking. So in the free democratic society, they have Jesus or Buddha, something like that, but actually they've become very materialistic too. And in the socialist society, they also have a kind of God which is the leader. And even so, human liberation appears to be a quick and easy solution, but is this liberation going to substantially accomplish what we're promising? How about free liberal democracy, and how about the socialist or communist approach? How can we solve this problem, this conflict? This is the issue that we face. Let's look at it from a historical point of view, the historical meaning of our Korean people. Let's go to the origin. Let's go to the core of heart. On one side, they are spiritual, idealistic, and the other side, the socialist side, is emphasizing the Hyeongsang, the material side.
정통성을 지니고 있다고 보십니까?
So, yet we have a tradition in common, and here it is.
순환국 국사를 주장하는 반면
Looking towards Korean ancient history,
물질적 가치를 추구한
the material side and the spiritual side, both are obviously necessary, but to unite North and South Korea, we need to unite the Seongsang, Hyeongsang, the internal, the external, spiritual and material sides. Both are necessary. So the concept of North Korea and South Korea can find a common base. There is a great ideology which was in our founder, and this solving the realistic problems both in the North and the issues, the freedom and liberation which the South also offers. So we're going to look at this closely. The free democratic liberal democracy in South Korea and the socialist leader-centered democracy in North Korea. We have people are crying out for their very existence in North Korea. And both of them say, our country, manse, hooray for our country and our people. So are we going to see some kind of miracle taking place or what? How can both of the sides, which basically advocate the same ultimate freedom and the same ultimate tradition, Korean tradition, how can we reconcile these? Both of the stories so far, the North Korea has a historical theory which talks about the conflict, that class struggle is at the core of Korean history. But this is false. It's an error. There is no story of class struggle in Korean history. Rather, there's the harmony. Capitalism, we can see some kind of a class struggle, but if you go to the Korean tradition, there's not such an element. So let's find out the concept that lies at the core of our people. The mind and heart of the working people, what are they looking for? They're in a state of confrontation, but they're actually the same people in North and South Korea. And what about the civilization of the world? In the same way, all of the people of the world want the same things. And so the Korean history and tradition is a microcosm of the whole world story. So right now we see the same thing with the 38th parallel, the DMZ dividing North and South Korea. So let's look at the view of values, set of values, which is prevailing in both sides. Looking at the view of values in North and South, in the North you have the people's democracy and the communism, and in the South you have the conceptual ideological freedom, and these two are in conflict. But both of them have not been realized in full. So looking at the past, present, and then the future, what can we foresee? The people's or citizens' democracy advocated in the North, and then the democracy of the South. The approaches are different, but let's look at the solution offered by Godism. Godism is the solution which we are offering for this problem of North-South Korean unification, reconciliation. Seongsang, which is the internal spiritual side, and Hyeongsang, which is the material external side. Pure materialism and pure spiritualism, if you want to distill them. So the view of God, if you want to call it in the sake of materialism, they have their own God, which actually ends up being the material God. God is viewed as a material being. In Marxism, we have this idea that man created God and that This God is a God of material. And in the South,
마르크스즘이 갖고 있는 프레임과 기독교가 갖고 있는 프레임이
there's the Christian and the Marxist view, but what's interesting is that both of them are quite similar in a certain way. They all have three stages of a creation, of a fall from grace, so to speak, and a restoration of the ideal. So, the materialist way through Marxism, the Christian way, the spiritual way, Christian Godism, Christian tradition and theory speaks about God up in the sky, God who we cannot touch, God who we cannot reach. And what about material side? They deny such a God. They want to see the God which we can deal with. If God is material and not just mental or spiritual, this is a big difference. So let's look at Hegel. Hegel was the core archetype philosopher of Christian history, and he came up with the dialectic, the idealistic dialectic, speaking about absolute spirit. So God, who is the absolute spirit, and he created the material out of the spirit, all of the things. Now Marx is completely opposite. In the case of Marx, man created God, so to speak. And everything's based on material. So yet three of them, they both go through three stages, and in a sense their paradigm is rather similar in many ways. So Marx, we can say, turned Hegel upside down on his head, and instead of a spiritual philosophy, he changed it into a material philosophy using the same dialectic principle. Now, in our society, we have many material benefits and conveniences. They're all based on material, so now we tend to worship material. We think material is almighty. We think we can solve the problems by material means. So in a sense, we've come a long ways from Hegel and from the Christian roots, and we've become rather material ourselves. So, if we look at the spirit or mental side, in the course of human history, how has the mind or the view of God evolved? Okay, let's look at that previous. There you see two kinds of ideas of God, the material God and the mental or spiritual God. In the free democratic society, they advocate the spiritual God, and in the communist societies or socialist societies, we have a material, quote-unquote, God. Even Kim Il-sung is viewed as a god in North Korea now. So we see that both of them have a kind of God, Christian God and the material or socialist, communist God. And the idea that material could evolve by itself, in other words, God evolves through material evolving. That's the idea in socialist or materialist theory. So Marxian materialism has evolution of material as opposed to Hegel and Strauss's evolution of the absolute spirit. They're two very opposite philosophies, but they're somehow similar. The Christian mission has been proclaimed. The view of God, the ideal of the Christian religion and spiritual, to realize a free society. The ideal of the Marxism is also to realize a free society, but look at the reality. All the problems happening in our free democratic societies. all of the human rights violations,
프레임을 가지고
all of the
정의할
inequalities.
수 있다고 볼 수 있어요.
So we're challenged by
이제는
that.
해답입니다.
So where has
일단
this
살펴본 대로 남북의 역사,
freedom
국가개념,
idea
인간해방,
gone to?
평화해방, 남남 갈등, 이 모든
Now,
근본적인
the
대치
South-South
상황에서
division problem
남북
within
어느 한쪽
the
나라를
South,
해결할
the idea of
능력도 힘도 없어요.
neo-Marxism or cultural revolution,
참으로 통일한 그의 미래는
spearheaded by
아름다운
Marcuse,
수밖에
by
남북 갈등의 근본 원인이라고 하는 것은 철학과 철학, 사상과 사상, 이대로 같이
this
싸웁니다.
conflict of different ideologies again resolves into the issue of Seongsang and Hyeongsang, internal versus external, spiritual versus material.
남북의 갈등을 해결할 수 있는 길은 어디 있을까?
Again, the North-South Korean division cannot be resolved unless we can resolve the own division within. The basis, again, is 심정, or heart.
심정을 중심으로 수치하게 할 때만 서로 관계를 맺을 수 있습니다.
By,
이 원인은 불변해지려고
in our relationships
남북의 현실
with
문제도 이
one
원인에
another,
의해서만 해결될 수 있습니다.
relationships of
심정을
people, of
중심으로
man and woman, of
남북의
elders and
당면과제는
youngers.
과연 해결될 수
The
있을까요?
relationship between North and South Korea can only be resolved through 심정, or heart, a loving heart, embracing heart, centered on God.
심정이란 사랑의 본질을 말하는데
So,
사랑의 본질은
when we look at the essence of love, then we see the 심정.
창조 때 발현된
What is a view of values? How do we build a world of
하나님은 이
heart?
심정을 기반으로 한
God is the origin of this 심정, or heart, and we need to internalize it. So, Dr. Moon Sun-myung and Reverend Dr. Han Hak-ja have spearheaded this movement of revival of the spiritual view of life, balancing the both sides, spiritual and material, centering upon heart, or 심정. This is the idea of Godism. So the concept of the Godism, of the 심정, we need to promote the idea of 심정, a heart, the culture of heart, a revolution of heart. How do we manifest 심정, or heart? When two people are fighting, let's go to the heart. Let's resolve it centered upon heart. Jesus Christ, in his words, also spoke about these things. He viewed everything from the standpoint of heart. So let's view the conflict between North and South and resolve these conflicts centered upon 심정, embracing heart, a heart of giving for others, with God always in the center of our heart. So I want to emphasize that 심정 is the fundamental core of solving the problems between the mutually conflicting parties. And without 심정, we cannot realize any fundamental solution in the end. So by living for the sake of others, then by the free democracy, loving and serving the other ones, by relating to them centered upon heart, love and respect, and valuing each with the center of values. Have we come to the last slide? Unfortunately, our time has run short. Of course, we have the basis for solving problems, but I have much to share yet. This is a wonderful, wonderful quest that we're on. So, the history, the past, the present, and the future. In our history of the Korean people and history of humankind, so many philosophers have appeared, philosophies of culture and civilization, of materialism, and of spiritual philosophies. In the process of the course of history of restoration, how can we resolve these issues in history? How can we resolve the problems of democracy and problems of the socialism? In the conflicts that arise between Hegel and Marx, how to view the commonality among us as the free democratic free people, by raising up. Let us look at the story of the Dangun. The root of the ideas of respecting heaven came from the founder of Korea, Dangun, 4,300 years ago. He has an amazing, interesting story that his father, which is the Son of God, who came down from heaven wanting to become a human being. So we can find very similar among the Jewish people and among other cultures. Respecting heaven, living for the sake of mankind, and realize a glorious, resplendent nation. These are the three pillars of Dangun's teachings. It's very similar to the idea of the Creator God in the Judaism and Christianity. So the three founders of Korea, Hwanun, Hwanung, and their mother, sorry, I forgot the name. These three gave birth to Dangun, who is the founder, emphasizing the value of the parents, the equality between them. The person who is the unity of heaven and earth and mankind and all of nature. We find these embodied in this legend of the Dangun. This fundamental legend, which is shared by the people of Korea and which has commonalities with the folk legends of people around the world, contains the solution for our reconciliation as Korean people on our Korean Peninsula. The founding ideology of Dangun, and this can be expressed now as Echun, Eyin, and Eguk, which is, we can say, the loving heaven, loving mankind, and loving our nation. Then we also realize this now through the co-prosperity, coexistence, and mutually shared values. These are the pillars of our UPF. These come from the founder, from Dangun, and now through our two parents. So equality, freedom, prosperity. The free democratic society and the ideal of socialism. We don't forget these dreams that we have, but we can realize them through such an ideal by carrying it to its completion. The ideal of Dangun in the beginning, our founder, and then going through these three stages, it's now being realized through this movement of peace. So the two pillars of the North and South Korean society and also in the world can be resolved through the Godism. Who is God? What is God? In Christian theory, Hegel spoke of the absolute spirit. So which one takes precedence, material or physical, spiritual? Hegel insisted that absolute spirit is the source and the wellspring of all things. So by having the consciousness of the God, by having the Shimjung, which is the core heart of God, Shimjung is heart. This was expressed through Adam and Eve, the first human beings, if they had united centering upon heart and love. Then in the invisible God would dwell completely in Adam and Eve, and materially they would be in good straits. So the two dual characteristics of Sangsang and Hyeongsang, mind and body, spirit and flesh, are embodied in the Adam and Eve, centered upon God, their creator. So the Shimjung is naturally within them because they're united with God, their source. So we can resolve the problem of materialism by having a correct understanding of God based on Shimjung, love and heart. Then the contradictions that came up in Christian history but whereas the Christian past leaders had neglected the material side, Nietzsche and Marx rose in protest and cried out about the injustices and the imbalances of Christian society and the severe contradictions that manifest in our societies in past. Then through a philosophical approach, we could handle these contradictions. So the Divine Comedy, and then the materialist, capitalist under Marx, by revering our Heavenly Parent as our parent, who is available to us, uniting the spiritual and physical sides, Sangsang and Hyeongsang, we can resolve the problem of Juche, the freedom, the subjectivity, autonomy, independence can all be realized. In South, people have faith. By going beyond our personal faith and embracing those, we can overcome the corruption, the defects of our culture, and we can resolve these and bring reconciliation of North and South Korea. This is the promise and hope that the Heavenly Unified Korea offers to not only the Korean people but to all humankind. The Ayin, love for people, the Echon, love for heaven, is the center, and the Hyojang, idea of loving people with God in the center. The Hyojang, centering upon conscience. Conscience is the center which connects us to our root. When we're one with God, our conscience is one with God, and then we can realize the substance of these good words. We can realize the ideals of the different ideologies in history by having another frame of mind, by looking at God and understanding Him or her correctly, then through the conscience, by realizing virtue, the laws and principles of virtue center upon conscience, upon Shimjang. This is the idea of Godism. A conscientious life, realizing a heartfelt relationship with people around us. This is not just an ideal. This is not just a mental revolution. This is a revolution of heart. Heart is the core. By connecting to that core of heart which is embodied in God, by embodying it in ourselves, then God can dwell in us. We become one with God. God can dwell with human beings. So the ideas of Marx, of Kant, they missed the idea of Shimjang. Kant spoke about intellectual ideals and conscience, but he missed the Shimjang. So the parents of the flesh and the parents of the spirit, these should be one. Through conscience, we unite these in ourselves as one. By acknowledging the conscience, then we uplift those good things which connect ultimately to God. So for the sake of human liberation, there is the class liberation, and then there's also the liberation of freedom. There's the external and internal. External is equality and class issues, and the internal is the spiritual, religious freedom and freedom of conscience. So these two pillars they can be resolved and reunited and reconciled through Godism. The idea of free democracy with God as the center, and likewise in the people's democracy of the North, it is only through Shimjang, through heart, that the ideals of the South and the North, and likewise around the world, can bear fruit.
동양윤리의 가장 기본적인
So, looking at all of you out there,
자식이 친해질 수 있습니까?
and how much confidence can we have?
친밀하다는 것은 자유롭다는 거군요.
We live in a free
부모
country,
속에
and
자식이 있고 자식 속에
we
부모가
are
있다고.
well blessed with
요즘
material
세대 같은
things.
속에
But
쉽지 않잖아요.
what about the world? They're not in good shape.
친하다고 하는 거.
There's many
자유롭다고
problems
친구
out
사이에
there.
자유롭고
And
제일 자유로운 것은 뻘거벗어도 자유로운 것이겠죠.
so, in my position,
여러분들이 성장하는 자녀들의
when I look at you and I see you have the families, the children,
벌거벗은 모습을
and you love and embrace your children,
목욕시킬 때 이것이 바로
what do
이제
you hope?
친하다는 거, 자유롭다고 하는
You're
그것이 바로
hoping
이제
for
그
your nation,
사랑의
Korean,
가장
which is
근본적인
the
친밀함입니다.
God-centered nation
이
and
자유라고
its
하는
God-centered family. So the goal of freedom is to realize such a society and culture not only in your family but in your nation, centered upon heart, 심정. Then the idea of capitalism, the idea of socialism become almost irrelevant. We transcend those. So, true equality, centering upon 심정, which does not mean everybody has the same salary or the same possessions, but by 심정, we have the same dignity and the same love. This is the true inward equality. So, let's balance the equality of conscience and having our an objective consciousness with whom this true artistic revolution, I think I probably better be winding up my speech now. So the ideal of Hyojong ideology centered upon heart can realize God's liberation even, and the liberation of mankind. So Hyojong ideology, what is that? God was the center. By liberating God, liberating the heart. Only by liberating the heart can we liberate our parents, our own parents, and also God, the parent of humankind. Above all, the one who is most hard to liberate is God, and He's the one who has most suffered. Our conscience leads us to liberate God, our ultimate parent. So, between each other, the liberation, as we speak, is not just each other, but always remember our core, our vertical pillar. Yeah, I think my time has come. I have received the notification, and so I have to let you guys go. Thank you very much. Okay, I conclude my presentation by Dr. Jin Sang Bae. Okay, thank you for